Maurizio a few minutes ago. Is he here? I mean, Maurizio is here.
I flew in just for you.
Yeah, I saw the bill. I saw the bill. But we have Deanna. We have Danny Davis that I started working with at SOFR, like, I think over 30, 35 years ago. And he's here. Roberto was sitting right here, a legend in the industry. Louise. I mean, is there more of a superwoman than Louise? Just an animal in terms of working. And Lynn and Lisa, and like, just incredible. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming here today. I think the caliber of brokers that we have sitting here and the caliber of individuals that we have sitting here is a real testament to who the panel is and who they are and what they stand for. Let me just make a quick sort of introduction about this panel, and then we can kind of move to the meat of it. And there's a lot to digest here today. So thank you all for being here. Really great to see so many familiar faces and such a strong turnout for this important conversation. First, a quick thank you to our host at 77 Greenwich. I don't know, you know, there's probably brokers here that never come down here to this area. I don't even, you probably looked at a Google map. Did you even recognize like where we are?
I passed it 3 times.
Like 77 Greenwich, where the hell is that, right? But this is one of our projects, and this is one of the most successful projects downtown in the past few months in terms of sellout. When everybody out there is looking for value, this is where value is delivered every single day. And those who come here and see really realize that. So 77 Greenwich is hosting us, and I just want to say thank you. And anybody who's interested in taking some tours after this, you know, welcome to stay. Also to everyone who helped make this possible, from our partners to the production and event team, and especially my team who's been working really hard to get this together. We're here just days before what could be one of the most consequential elections in New York City's recent history. And the stakes for this industry couldn't be any higher. Elections always bring uncertainty, but this one comes at a time when the real estate market is already in flux. Interest rates, policy, debates, affordability, and investor sentiments all converging in ways we haven't seen in years. On top of that, global geopolitical instability, from conflicts overseas to shifting capital flows and migration patterns, is all influencing how international investors see New York. At the same time, national political polarization and local social challenges, from housing inequality to public safety to quality of life issues, are all shaping buyer confidence, neighborhood perception, and long-term investment decisions. The goal for today's panel isn't to predict who will win or to take sides. It's to explore what the outcomes might mean for the city we all work in and care about, for brokers, developers, investors, and homeowners alike. Our conversation will touch on leadership, market confidence, policy, and opportunity. But ultimately, it's all about how New York continues to evolve and how each of us adapts and leads within it. Now, I'm honored to be joined by 3 people who bring very, very different perspectives. The reason why I picked them, let me just put this on silent, because the developer just called me. And decades of experience shaping, understanding, and leading this industry. I'll start with Bess. I'm sure she needs no introduction, but I'll do it anyway. Bess Freedman is the CEO of Brown Harris Stevens, overseeing more than 2,300 agents across offices in New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, and Florida. A former attorney, she led the firm's transformation into one of the most prominent privately held brokerages and has become a strong voice on brokerage culture, equity, and social purpose. Her industry-wide leadership gives her a unique vantage on how policy, perception, and real estate economics shape brokerage sentiment and long-term business strategy. Welcome, Bess. Jason Haber. Jason is a high-profile New York residential broker and a social entrepreneur who, in 2024, co-founded the American Real Estate Association.
With Maurizio.
With Maurizio, who flew in yesterday especially for this. and a national advocacy organization for agents. His background spans real estate practice, public policy work, including a consul run and earlier political organizing role, and civic engagement, offering a rare blend of hands-on brokerage and policy insight. Jason brings a deep understanding of how legislative change affects buyers, sellers, and broker network. Thank you, Jason, for joining us.
Thank you.
And the person to my right, Bob Knakal. Bob is the CEO and chairman of BK Real Estate Advisors. He is a best-selling author and a legendary commercial broker in New York, having initiated and led one of the city's most prolific investment sales platforms, and later serving as a chairman of New York Investment Sales at JLL. With a track record spanning thousands of buildings, crazy, and over $20 billion in sales. I mean, can you imagine? He offers a panel, Capital Markets Lens, precisely how global funds and institutional investors interpret policy risks, zoning, and execution in real estate. Bob, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks, Shlomi. Hi, everybody.
So let me just set the stage a little bit about the election in the industry. 2025 mayoral election is shaping up as a defining moment for New York real estate. With Zohar Mamdani's progressive platform drawing national attention, the conversation around housing, taxation, and city management is at all-time high intensity. The election's outcome could influence not just policy, but global perception of New York as a place to live, invest, and build. As brokers, developers, and investors watch closely, confidence, anticipation, and uncertainty are mixing in equal measure. Bess, as a leader overseeing over 1,000 agents, what are you hearing about the mood in the field? How aware or anxious are brokers about the election? And how are you helping them stay focused amid the headlines?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Shlomi, for having us here. And yes, I mean, this election, this mayor's race has gotten national attention, and that doesn't usually happen. So everyone is talking about this because he's got a position on rent freezes and free buses and all these things that scare people. And so, yes, we've had buyers and sellers ask about it, be concerned, agents be concerned about it. But we're being a calming force about it because we've had bad mayors in the past. We know that de Blasio, his administration, was not real estate friendly. And yet the market was very resilient versus his political influence. And I think we have to consider it in that sort of lens. The mayor can only really has control over the police department, the fire department. He doesn't have a unilateral ability to make all these changes that he's talking about. So right now it seems scary and uncertain, and it's more his rhetoric that I think scares people in this environment of divisiveness and where people don't feel safe. And so I would just say keep people calm, encourage them. Look, there is an incredible constraint on supply in New York City. People want to be here. We are the talent capital of the world. That's never going to change. And I would just say just encourage people to stay calm. We will get through this. You have the governor in place. And I just think that there's a lot more built up about it, and people are reacting, they are emotional. And so I think you have to use some common sense.
Bob, from an investor standpoint, how closely are capital partners watching this race? Is it shaping short-term positioning, or are most taking a longer view that transcends local politics?
No, well, truthfully, not a lot of people are talking about it in the capital markets. I think it is being used as an excuse by some folks not to transact, but I think they would have not transacted otherwise. So it's more of an excuse than anything. I think the biggest concern that folks in the industry have is that what Mamdani talks about, 80% of it he has absolutely no control or influence over. It's state legislature stuff. What he can impact is the rent-stabilized housing market that's already had three major body blows given to it, HSTPA in 2019, COVID, and then the interest rate environment is really wreaking havoc with that market sector. The diminution in value has been more than we even saw during the S&L crisis in the early 90s. But I think what we're most concerned about is the flow of capital. And this is something that even experienced people in the real estate market don't understand. is everybody thinks cap rates are highly tied to and correlated to interest rates. They're not. They're highly tied and correlated to the flow of capital. If I gave you $2 billion right now in equity and said, Shlomi, go buy a multifamily in the financial district. No matter what the interest rate environment was, I guarantee you cap rates on multifamily in the financial district would go down, right? It's about the flow of capital. That's the biggest concern. Is crime going to get out of control? Are these things that he's saying actually going to get implemented? And unfortunately, I have a very jaded view of politicians because my wife's good friend was dating a New York State Assembly person. And basically, after he had 7 or 8 glasses of wine, we started to talk turkey. And he says, look, the reality is we have to bullshit to get elected, and then after we get elected, we can do what we think is right. So whether he really believes what he says or anybody believes what they say, until they get into office, we won't really know.
So we'll dive more into these proposals that Bob just mentioned, and we'll talk about whether it's rhetoric or real, and what challenges there may be with what he's proposing and what's actually possible to do. Jason, you work with both clients and colleagues who are politically engaged. How are people talking about this election? Is it a turning point or just another New York moment that the city will adapt to?
Well, it's certainly creating a lot of uncertainty. Every election has a degree of uncertainty, but I would imagine if we did this same panel in 2021 when the choices were Eric Adams and Curtis Sliwa, we have a different crowd here. The people would be less engaged. I would bet that in this room, just by way of example, how many of you have already early voted? By show of hands. That's amazing. Thank you, everyone, for voting early. And then how many plan to vote on Election Day or before? So that's all the hands in the room. So, and that also tracks, by the way, with, there's a lot of, everyone's talking about the high turnout in early voting right now. You should know the vast majority of votes will still be counted. Voters will still go to the polls on Election Day. About 68% is the expectation. And so we're on our way to a potentially historic turnout, which I want to stress to everyone in the room means that the polls are probably not accurate. Now, you never know who people are voting for.
Jason, excuse me, that statistic, 68% of registered voters are expected to vote?
No, 68% of the voter
voting
universe.
Okay. Because that's one of the biggest problems we have is voter apathy.
Right.
People
Well,
just don't give a shit.
Because there's
we have
5 million
14 or
registered,
15% of registered voters actually vote, which is the biggest problem in New York.
So the all-time record for a mayor's race was 1993 and 1989. Some of you who were there here at the time will remember that was Dinkins-Giuliani. So they hit 1.89 million votes cast. And to compare that, by the way, to a presidential election, which we just had 12 months ago, 2.7 million people voted in the presidential election. All those folks are still eligible to vote in the mayoral election. But there are a lot of people where voting is a quadrennial experience. They're just going to do it once every 4 years. And so the voter universe is much smaller, which is why literally every vote counts that much more in a local election as opposed to a federal one. And so the voter turnout right now is on pace for about 1.7 million. The last election, 2021, there was 1.15 million people voted.
But there are about 5 million registered voters for this race. And, as Jason said, maybe close to 2 million will vote. Could be more, though. We might see more. It's possible.
Do you think that that's going to change results?
Yes, so 100%. So here's the theory if you want to know what to look at for this race. The theory is this. It's called the Mamdani ceiling theory, effectively. If you look at the polls, one thing that's clear in every poll is that he's between 42 and 46%. It's the most static you've probably ever seen in a local election. He has not moved since June 25th, the day after the primary. So that means, in theory, that there's a limit to, he never cracked 50%, there's a limit to how many people actually in New York are going to vote for him. That number right now is estimated at about 775,000, let's call it. Okay. Because he got about 500,000 in the primary, he's going to pick up a lot more now. So the question is, what's that as a percent of? If 1.3 or 1.4 million people vote, is an early night by 9:10, you can turn the channel off, we know who the next mayor will be. Once you get over 1.8, it becomes gray. Once you get over 2, if that happens, all bets are off. The models, all the polling that you're seeing, by the way, is based on the last 4 elections, which were 1.1 to 1.2 million votes cast. So the polls will not be reflective of the voter universe if we do have this surge in turnout. And the other thing about that that's really interesting is in June, we had what I call an age quake. As you know from the stories, everyone under 35 voted. It was the biggest voter block in the election, which is a stunning achievement. That 35 and under was the largest voting block in an election. You never see that. So now what's happening in the November election so far in early voting? There's another age quake, but it's in 50 and older, who are now the largest voting block as of the numbers from yesterday. They're now the largest voting block, which suggests a shift in the electorate between what it looked like in June and what it'll look like now. We have no idea how those people are voting, of course, but you can make inferences that the electorate is going to look different and thus the voting will be different than it was in June. So it's something to keep an eye on. For those who live, anyone live on the Upper West Side? All right, so if you live on the Upper West Side, it's a great example. On the Upper West Side is the highest voting concentration portion of the entire country. Many people don't know this. There are more votes cast on the Upper West Side than anywhere else in the United States of America. It's the most voter-rich place. And so the best way to figure out what's going on is to go to, like, Fairway. Just go to Fairway. Lovingly, we call them LOLs. You know them as little old ladies who shop at Fairway. And if you poll the LOLs and ask who they're voting for, you can probably predict the outcome of this election. So next time you're at Fairway, pay attention to what's happening there. That is the
I learned
epicenter.
something new about LOL, which I never use in like text, but my daughter does.
But if you use LOL on me, I'm going to put you
It's a loving phrase we use.
All right, let's move to, I want to talk about like market dynamics, confidence, capital, clients. Political cycles affect sentiment and liquidity. Elections bring uncertainty that can stall major decisions, shift pricing expectations, and test broker resilience. As policy direction becomes clearer, markets adjust and stabilize, sometimes rapidly. In a high-cost, regulation-dense environment, a change in tone from City Hall can redefine how brokers, developers, and institutional investors perceive risk versus opportunity. So just for context, this part, I want to explore how political transitions influence deal flow, client psychology, and capital behavior, from high net worth buyers to global funds deciding whether to stay, pause, or pivot. I'll start with Bob, and I'll take it sort of macro to a little micro of a market. So Bob, how does political volatility affect institutional capital? Do investors wait out elections, or do they price risk differently for New York?
Yeah, well, most of the time things are so telegraphed ahead of time that people react to the market. The market reacts quickly, like the FOMC. People say that's the Federal Open Mouth Committee. You know, that they telegraph everything so much that interest rate increases have been baked into the market. I mean, interestingly, we had rates drop 50 basis points, and interest rates actually went up because it was so baked into the market. So, you know, I think people are trying to gauge what their next step is when it comes to politics. I think one of the most interesting things about the cycle that we've been in for the last few years is that it has been unlike anything we've ever seen before. I've been doing this 42 years now. And during the S&L crisis in the early 90s, the recession early 2000s, the GFC, property values were going down, but just to different degrees, but everything was heading down. Today, we have different segments of the market moving in different directions. So when people say, how's the market? It's impossible to paint it with a broad brush. We have our retail market is very strong and increasing. Our industrial market is very strong. The hotel market in New York City is the hottest market of any market segment. And land is going up in value. But then you look at our multifamily market and our office market, similar to the broader market, different segments of the market are moving in different directions. The free market apartments, you know, politicians say we want New York to be more affordable for everybody. Almost everything they've done has made New York less affordable for everybody. So you have free market rents are skyrocketing. Now new buildings, they're getting $150 a foot. So cap rates on multifamily free market buildings are dropping. They're getting back down to around 5, whereas on stabilized housing, cap rates are 7 or 8%. because nobody wants them. And the reason that our turnover is so low is because our rent-stabilized housing stock has a bunch of zombie buildings in it. The owner has no equity, the debt's impaired, the building owner doesn't want the building, the bank doesn't want the building because the liability is embedded in these buildings. So I think the Mamdani factor in politics is going to play more havoc with that sector of the market than anything else. And you look at the office building sector again, Class A new construction office is doing great. It seems like you build a new office building on Avenue D, you're going to get triple-digit rents. There's strong tenant demand. Buildings are performing very well, but B and C office still has not found its bottom.
So in terms of big capital investing in New York, you said something before. Those who weren't going to invest are just not investing or finding the elections as an excuse not to go in. But you haven't seen a pause or a holdback in terms of, let me see what happens with the elections before I make my investment?
I think the people who are saying that wouldn't have bought anyway. People always look for an excuse. You know, somebody says, hey, Bob, I want to be on your investor list. Send me your deals. And they keep saying, no, I'm not interested. I'm not. Nobody's going to say, hey, I have no money. I'm not interested in your deal now. They're going to make up some excuse.
So I'll give you a quick example. So those of you who know us, Reuveni, what we do is we represent developers. We only represent new development projects and developers, and we work with capital entities, partners to those developers on a regular basis. So we have a very big pipeline of conversions coming up, office and hotel conversions to resi. And the projects went on the market for financing. We have some financing people in the audience. Construction loans. Entities were standing online. Now, I found it to be a little shocking. Here we go. We had $1 billion out on the street for financing. And entities, capital entities, were standing online to finance. No concern. Tons of confidence with everything that we're discussing here in terms of where's the market going. People are going to step away from New York. The big capital that's investing, based on these indications, is confident. So there's a little bit of an imbalance here, but on the street right now, there's plenty of capital, and capital is invested.
Well, I think let's look at the conversion market, which you mentioned. There are 57 office to resi conversions going on in the city now. It's 23.7 million feet of this stuff is being converted, which is remarkable. And the reason it's happening is because the 467M tax abatement is so compelling. You pay zero taxes during the conversion process. You get a 90% tax abatement for 35 years. And you can double the size of the building. You have a 100,000-foot building, you could add 100,000 feet to it and get the tax abatement on the entire building. So that's motivating a lot of people to do those deals.
So incentives work.
Incentives work, and similarly, the failures of the 485X tax abatement program is creating supply problems. But you mentioned construction loans. I will tell you the construction lending market is very, very much a relationship-based market. We study the supply pipeline. There are 7 banks that have more than one construction loan in the market. There are 73 lenders that only have one construction loan in the market today. Why is that? Because it's a relationship loan. Big client comes to them, big customer comes to them and says, hey, I want a construction loan from you guys. Well, we really don't want to do it, but for you, we'll do it. That's the overwhelming majority of the market. So I think it's more relationship-based than looking at necessarily market confidence.
Oh, but it's good. From my perspective, it's good to see that money has been invested and not being held back based on an election that's coming up that people are treating as possible issues and concern. Bess, are you seeing your agents or clients hesitating ahead of the election? Or are they treating politics as just like background noise?
I agree with what Bob is saying. I mean, for the most part, overall, people are continuing. We're seeing really big sales get done. We're working on many different projects, new developments, and everything is moving forward. So again, I think a lot of this is emotion and concern and talk about things, but the reality is that Adams won last time because he talked about safety, quality of life, because it was after COVID, everybody was worried. And the big talking point today has been affordability, because people can't afford to be in the city anymore. And so he's got this message, Mamdani, that inspires young people, and they think he's going to change the world. And we know that doesn't work, but I think that's gotten a lot of people to get excited about him. Whether he is the mayor or not, we will survive, we will be fine. The biggest concern, I think, for everyone that they're talking about is quality of life and safety, because he's working to loosen the screws and the tools for police enforcement. And I think that scares people, because we need
Scaring them to a point of, let me hold back, let me see what happens in the elections, I'm going to not buy today, I'm going to rent, I'm going to extend my lease, I'm going to stay where I am. Let me see what happens with the elections, and then I'll make a decision. Any of that?
Yeah,
you
there's
hear?
a little bit of wait and see. I had one developer, just one, where we walked a site where he said, you know what, I'm just going to wait and see. But that could be a bit of what Bob is talking about. He may not have just wanted to pull the trigger on the project. You know, I think, you know, it's a lot of what people are hearing, and they're acting on emotion. But business, we're having a great year. The numbers are great. People are showing up. Deals are getting done. We closed a huge deal the other day. So I think a lot of it is just noise, and we have short memories. Listen, when Trump was running and everybody's saying it was going to be the end of the world and the life was going to end, everybody went back to their lives, and we continue. So a little bit of it is just chaos, and I think we have to, you know, use common sense right now.
So we do numbers on a weekly basis in real time. Total transactions in the city. With the city, I mean Manhattan. We go all the way to 125th Street, and we evaluate co-op condos and new developments. On any given week, there's an X amount of total apartments and residential properties that were sold. We haven't seen much of a dip or a change in the past few months. Now, I thought this will change towards the elections. So we had an amazing summer. July and August were just like, were amazing. I don't think I've had a summer like that in years. Things slowed down September and October, but when we look at numbers citywide, the numbers haven't really changed that much. They dip from one week to another because of holidays, because of whatever, but we haven't seen much of a dip in terms of total sales in the city that possibly would indicate, you know what, I'm holding back, to a point of, you know, mass indication. But Jason, what trends are you noticing among buyers and sellers? Like, are sentiment and urgency changing as uncertainty rises?
Yeah, but like, there's always opportunity out there, and I'll give you a quick example, because Bob referenced HSTPA, which of course has hurt the rent-stabilized market, but it's dropped supply of units on the market, and so we have this interesting point where rents are going higher and higher. So I actually have buyers out there. We just closed something not far from here recently, who's buying condos now because he can get better pricing right now, right? He has negotiability as a buyer. And then when he goes to market to rent the units, he has pricing power.
So you've seen condo prices drop?
Well, obviously there's negotiability, and especially some of the new developments out there. There are really good deals to be had for buyers. So he's going out, and we're looking at more apartments on Friday. And his thesis is, should Mamdani win, why would rents go down? Because he's actually not going to solve for affordability. His theory is, which is also mine, the city is actually about to, if he wins, the city would become more unaffordable for renters. But the opportunity there...
Why is that? Can you explain?
Sure. So if you do, say, freeze the rent, and you pull more apartments off the market, and you don't increase supply...
Why would you pull apartments off the market if you freeze the rent?
Well, if you freeze the rent and apartments need to be updated and renovated, landlords aren't going to do work and lose money.
They're already 100,000 not on the market.
Right. Well, whatever the number is, 50, 100,000. That's a huge. There's a huge amount of apartments that are just sitting vacant.
So you're talking about rent-stabilized
Yeah,
apartments?
that's like-
No, what I'm
just,
saying
just
is-
to clarify.
These are rent stabilized
Yes.
apartments that are just as part of the supply chain. Though those can be released and rented, they're not going to be.
And what percentage does
It's about
that...
40%, isn't it?
Yeah, rents. It's a well, 25% of the market overall is rent stabilized. Then you-
25% overall of the rental market is rent stabilized. 75% is free market.
Just about. There's also rent control too, which is small, which is lower. And
Sure. So-
with rent control and stabilized, it's more than
Sure.
that.
So for the 25%, a landlord just doesn't have any incentive in terms of renting apartments. They take it off the market because why would they invest the money, renovate, et cetera, if they can't raise rents?
Right, they can't earn it. Because of HSTPA, they can't earn it back. So do you hire someone and say, well, you're going to lose money doing your job? Only real estate agents, by the way. Instead of that, I'm in a room of agents. But normally, if I was going to hire a reporter, I'd say, you're going to lose money on doing your job. They wouldn't take the job. Why would landlords
Sure.
be any different?
So in other words, to explain, right, the 75 remaining percent is where the opportunity is in terms of raising rents.
Right, because if we're not increasing the supply on the market, then we're just going on this loop, right? We're in this vicious cycle where you're just going to make the city more and more unaffordable.
Yep.
Sure. Okay, let's talk a little bit about leadership, markets, and outlook, right? Zoran Mamdani's rise as a young, policy-driven, non-establishment candidate challenges the city's tradition of experienced executive leadership. Supporters view him as principled and reform-minded. Skeptics worry about management inexperience and ideological inflexibility. For the real estate community, his leadership style, perceived competence, and credibility on the world stage all influence market confidence and external investment appetite. So just for context, the question here is whether New York's complexity demands experience or vision, and how an unconventional leader might reshape local and global perceptions of the city as a safe, stable investment hub. So, Bess, how much does a mayor's personal image and executive background influence agent and client confidence in New York's market?
I mean, it obviously makes a big difference. The fact that he has a very thin resume impacts our city. And, you know, when he was in the state assembly, there was a bill, and he was one of the only 2 legislators to veto a bill that was to protect subway MTA workers from criminal attacks. So I'm more concerned about what this says to people for safety. And I think, look, as we know, New York City, greatest city in the world, incredible melting pot of people with diversity. We've been through so much: COVID, 9/11, global financial crisis, you name it, right? This is an incredible place. But what is concerning is to have someone who lacks experience, who has been, as Jason describes, lionized, right, by the young people because he's going to give everything away. And if you think about this, free buses, for example, there's a writer, his name is Rob Henderson, and he coined this phrase called luxury beliefs, which is, you know, you pass some sort of law or create some sort of policy that impacts the communities that you don't live in, right? If you have free buses, imagine everyday people trying to go to work, you have teachers, you have social workers, whatever, there's going to be loitering on there. How is that going to impact their everyday lives? So what concerns me is that he doesn't really understand how a complex city like New York works. He hasn't been a leader. He's also was born into, you know, incredible privilege, all of those things. And I think he's charismatic. He's a very good communicator, excellent with social media. And I think that's where we have failed, is that we haven't, you know, I think other parties haven't really run a great race in that regard. But that concerns me because New York requires great leadership. And Mayor Adams, I know he gets a lot of criticism because he didn't surround himself with really solid people. But, you know, he did get a lot done. You know, he did accomplish a lot for the city. There's no more encampments. There's police, you know, on the subways today. We have the city of Yes. I mean, he did good things. You know, he was a moderate for all his criticism. And I think I'm concerned more about, to me, it's the safety issue and lack of leadership. And I think it's concerning.
Was it Adams you mentioned, or was it Bloomberg just now?
Adams, no, I mentioned Adams. I thought he gets a lot of slack. I understand why he's criticized, but he actually did some good things here. You know, he did a decent job for the city.
Yeah. So, if I could just add one thing that people don't understand about how big city government is, if you think about just the public schools, for example, in New York City, 1 out of every 335 Americans, not New Yorkers, but 1 out of every 300, if you picked every 335 people in this country, they are a student in the New York City public school system. Think about that. That's how big the New York City public school system is. If it was a city, it'd be the 10th biggest city in America. The person who's elected as mayor is in charge of the whole bureaucracy, but the schools, they can leave a very big imprint on it. Who the chancellor is, we'll see. But the schools alone, 1.3 million students. It's mind-bogglingly big city government.
So, given that and the complexity of this city, and given your civic and political insight, how do you evaluate Mamdani's readiness to lead such a complex city like New York? And what parallels do you see in past outsider candidates?
Well, he's not ready, first. He's not. But, he does have the opportunity to appoint smart people who are very experienced city managers around him. First deputy mayor of New York is an incredibly important position. Who he puts as schools chancellor, police commissioner, these things matter. And so even he may be able to make up for his lack of experience by surrounding himself, and he's talked about this, he's talked about a team of rivals, and surrounding himself with really experienced people who could help him navigate the maze of bureaucracy that comes with running New York City. So that would be his answer and how he's going to compensate for it.
Can you recall any like recent outsiders that, you know, were not necessarily part of the system and maybe took over a position like this? And
Well, there was a guy named Michael Bloomberg, but think about the executive management experience that he had. Before him, you can go through all the history of mayors. They've generally had either executive experience or a combination of legislative experience in the state government, city government, or the federal government.
Yeah, but let's look, I think the insider-outsider thing is more about, do you have business experience or not? Running a municipality is no different than running a business. New York City has 53 agencies and 300,000 employees. This guy has no experience. Bloomberg did a great job because he had experience running organizations. And it's, you know, yes, you can appoint the right people, but you have to know how to guide those people, right? So it's potentially a huge problem. Dinkins was a guy who never had a real job either. And look at what happened to the city under him. It was a complete disaster, and in fact, such a disaster that it created an opportunity for Giuliani to get elected. Right. So there are some people who think, hey, if this guy Mamdani gets elected, he thinks he's going to be the first human being in the course of human civilization that will make price fixing work, which there are example after example. Every single time anyone has tried price fixing, whether it was De Beers in the diamond industry or OPEC with oil, anytime you have price fixing or cartels, it leads to prisoner dilemma choices that people have to make. It leads to wanting to cheat. It leads to wanting to get around the rules. Our housing market is no different. And look, it potentially could create a situation where things get so bad, and I agree with Bess, that we're going to get through it. But it might create an opportunity for someone who's more pro-business and pro-real estate to come along and be the next mayor.
So from an investor's standpoint, how do age, perceived ideology, or lack of executive experience affect capital allocation decisions?
Well, again, I think it's very, very sector specific. I think you could see a complete abandonment of the rent-stabilized housing sector. And what will happen, I guarantee you, if he gets elected, everybody's going to be shorting. People on Wall Street will be shorting the banks that have exposure to that stock. And the government knows, the federal government knows that there are problems in our regional banking system. Look no further than the way they handled the sale of the Signature loans. They didn't sell the loans. They sold a servicing contract on the loans, because if they sold the loans themselves and they sold at 50 or 60 cents on the dollar, which is what they were worth, it would have put 4 dozen banks out of business overnight. So they buried their head in the sand. They made this cockamamie structured deal that didn't really give any market insight. But that rent-stabilized housing business, and the fact that Mamdani is saying he's going to freeze the rent for 4 years, he's basically saying, I'm going to break the law. The law says that the Rent Guidelines Board is supposed to set the increases or how that market functions based on statistics that are not yet determined. So the guy's saying, I don't care about the law. I'm going to break the law. I'm going to freeze the rent. And this gets to what Mitt Romney was talking about back when he was running for president. And he was on a hot mic and said, look, 47% of people aren't going to vote for me anyway. Well, 47% of people at the time were net takers from the government as opposed to giving to the government. And at the time I said, the minute that let's go to 40,000 feet and get very philosophical. At some point in the future, New York City is not going to be the capital of the world, and the United States is not going to be the dominant country. Look at the greatest civilizations, the Holy Roman Empire, Persia I, Persia II. You look at these places that were dominant in the world. They all are no longer dominant. There's going to come a point in time, and hopefully it's 500 years from today, that the United States isn't going to be what it is and New York isn't going to be what it is. But when we get to 50.1% of Americans are net takers from the government than givers to the government, I'm going to give you free health care, free rent, free cars, free computers, free everything, free food. I'll give you free everything. That person's going to get elected. And that will be the downfall of the U.S.
So we'll talk about rhetoric in a minute. I want to address like each proposal and kind of understand, what's real, what's not, right? But talking about opportunities, right? Looking ahead, despite the turbulence, New York has an unparalleled ability to reinvent itself. We've seen it before. Change creates dislocation, but also opportunities for adaptive developers, creative brokers, and bold investors. We've seen that before. With policy shifts looming, the most successful participants will anticipate new incentives, demand pockets, and renewed confidence once the dust settles. So where will growth, innovation, and capital concentrate as this city enters its next chapter? And regardless of who leads, regardless of whether it's Mamdani or maybe Cuomo. So I'll start with you, Bob. What asset classes or neighborhoods stand to gain most from policy-driven change? And where might smart capital flow next?
Yeah, well, I think as challenged as the multifamily market is today, I think that's where the biggest opportunity is. Show me a market anywhere in the U.S. where you can buy properties on a price per square foot basis that you could have paid 25 years ago. That's where we are today. So that market is dictated, and unfortunately, our multi-housing market, the performance is more highly correlated to public policy than even supply and demand, which is really scary. But it's a political pendulum that swings back and forth. That political pendulum has never been heavier, but the people who are actually buying multifamily today, and that market has changed dramatically. From 2018, I can't tell you how many hundreds and hundreds of clients I had that said, I only buy New York City apartment buildings. I won't go to New Jersey. I won't go to Westchester. I'm not going to Long Island. Only New York City. 85 to 90% of them won't buy a building in New York City today, no matter what the price is.
So is that where the opportunity lies somehow?
The people who have come into the market that are buying believe that political pendulum will eventually swing. Maybe it's going to be 10 years from now or 15 years from now or 20 years from now, but they believe if I'm buying, not only am I buying the buildings at less than replacement cost, I'm buying them at less than land value. So I'm getting the land at a discount, I'm getting the building for free. Over the long term, if I don't over leverage this investment, I'm going to be happy that I bought it, or my kids are going to be happy I bought it, or my grandkids will be happy I bought it.
That's very patient money, no?
Very.
Bob,
That's the way the market works.
Bob, can I ask you a question on that? What if a policy change allowed for rent-stabilized landlords to accept Section 8 vouchers at the Section 8 voucher cap instead of the rent-stabilized cap? And this way, you're using federal money, so instead of New York taxpayer money going to like build a bridge to nowhere in Kentucky, that money gets used here. It's still a stabilized apartment, but the Section 8 housing cap is now higher than the rent-stabilized cap in much of the city. Would that change the dynamic from landlords?
I think the housing policy has to be completely changed. Look, if you're one of these socialist Democrats who believe that an Econ 101 textbook is capitalist propaganda, look no further than the pandemic, right? The city had vacancy that soared. Our rents in Manhattan dropped 30%. There's not been a housing policy that's been implemented anywhere in the United States that made rents go down 5%. We need new supply. The problem in the system that creates this problem is that our policymakers have a conflict of interest, because if they create new supply, it brings new people into their districts that don't know them and might not vote for them. And this is exactly the excuse that was used when Atlantic Yards was proposed to be rezoned. The local council person voted against it. Elliot Spitzer, who was the governor at the time, called her in to his office, and I won't say who it is because she's still active in politics, but he said, Tish, why did you vote against this? And she said, because, Governor, that you bring 25,000 people into my district that don't know me, might not vote for me again. I want to get reelected. That's the conflict that our policymakers have. So we have to fundamentally change the process. And I think in addition to the expanding Section 8, the marginalization of the MCI and the IAI increases that were embedded in HSTPA devastated the market and added to the upward pressure on free market rents. I'll take you back to 1978. It's the World Series is going on, so I'll take you to the 1978 World Series. Yankees and Dodgers. Reggie Jackson's hitting all the home runs. The Goodyear blimp pans out over Yankee Stadium. 6 fires going on within 3 blocks of Yankee Stadium. Howard Cosell, the announcer, famously says, "The Bronx is burning." Why was the Bronx burning? Because in 1978, the dilapidation rate in New York City was 14%, meaning that 14% of the apartments were in such crappy shape they were deemed uninhabitable. So the city wisely put in the MCI, Major Capital Improvement, and the IAI, Individual Apartment Improvement Programs, to incentivize the private sector to invest in the housing stock. So those investments return 30% on invested capital. So what does the private sector do? What it always does. It reacts to good incentives, dumps tens of billions of dollars into the housing stock. In 2019, the dilapidation rate, 0.04%. And what do these knuckleheads do? They marginalize both of those programs. So now we have the estimates, you heard 100,000, most estimates are 60 to 80,000 apartments are nailed shut. So I had lunch with the governor a few weeks ago. I said, Kathy, just do an executive order, just reinstate MCI and IAI. You'd have 60 to 80,000 apartments under gut renovation within 2 weeks. How much sheetrock are you going to sell? How many appliances are you going to sell? How many toilets, bathtubs, sinks, flooring, electricity, fixtures? Come on, this would be so economically stimulative, and it would exert downward pressure on rents because you're increasing supply in a big way. And you get the smile and the nod, and it's just a blank stare.
Wouldn't he make a great mayor? Bess, I know this is a hard question, but what opportunities do you see emerging for brokers and agents in the next 12 to 24 months, even in times of change?
I mean, there are always opportunities. I mean, this race is no different in many ways than other races that we've faced. So I think it's more market conditions. The challenge is more of, you know, whether buyers can afford to buy and sellers are willing to sell. They've locked in, you know, rates that they don't want to let go of. We still have that issue. And I think, you know, agents are constantly reinventing themselves, connecting with other people to make sure that they can build business. And that's going to just continue. I think that, you know, what a real estate agent does today is very special, and that hasn't changed. It's an information and service business. And despite the AI and technology, which we talked a little bit about yesterday, which is important because it does empower you and makes you more efficient, but still people want to sit down and work with you. They want to talk to you. They have to build trust with you. So I think there's tons of opportunities for real estate agents today. And we have to go with the ebbs and flows. It was a very dark time during COVID. I will never forget how scary that time was. Offices were shut. We didn't know what was going to be, what would happen to the market. That felt so eerie to me. So I feel like there's almost anything that we can overcome. We are very resilient, and we can't let these sort of political headwinds and rhetoric make us feel like it's the end of the world, because it isn't. So I just think we just got to stick to what we know, keep doing what we do.
Jason, you agree? How should buyers and sellers position themselves now to capitalize on potential post-election shifts?
No matter what the outcome is, like, I don't know anyone that makes money being short New York in the long term, right? Like, maybe in the dips there's opportunities if they come. Like, I think it was it John Jacob Astor who said, if I could do it my life all over again, I'd buy every inch of real estate in Manhattan. And like, there is through the noise is where really good agents, I think, can educate their clients and help them find what everyone else is missing.
So, you know, some of us in this room have been doing this for a long time. I mean, I can pick out people from the crowd, 10, 20, 30 years, right, in the business. And if you've been doing it a while, you know, we all experience cycles, bad times. You mentioned COVID, 2008, 2000, September 11th, right? And we're still sitting here. And at the time when those things happened, like you said, it was like the end of the world. We were facing the abyss. We had no idea what was coming the next day. Everything seemed dark and pessimistic, right? But we've been past it. And if we have, and we know, when we have that experience, then it's probably, maybe, regardless of what's going on right now, a little easier for us. But what do you say to new agents who come into this, who haven't experienced like the cycles and the dark times and didn't go through, okay, we're going to get through this. I did get through this. I suffered, but I thrived, and here I am today in a better place, stronger, smarter, and ready for the next one, right? What do you tell them?
I think you tell new agents that it's nothing like you see on reality TV. Sorry, Maurizio. But because it isn't, you know, you have to have the hustle muscle. You're grinding every day. It's a lot of hard work. It's 7 days a week. You know, you have to be available, and it's a tough gig, and you only get paid for results. And so, you know, there's a perception about what real estate agents do, and there's a reality about it. And agents are some of the hardest working people that I know, you know, and you have to understand that, you know, in the narrative that's been painted of agents as a sort of greedy, you know, the star of the show sort of image is not accurate. Most agents have their heads down, they're looking at floor plans, getting photographs done, meeting people, working all the time, setting their kids to the side to make sure they can show up for their clients. And I feel like we have to work in a different way and focus on the things that matter. And agents need to tell a new story about themselves. We're trusted advisors. We have to make sure that, you know, the public doesn't consider us to be like used car salesmen, which I think was that what you quoted yesterday? Yeah. I think that it's an incredible opportunity out there. And New York City is a great place to be an agent. So I just say we have to stay positive about it.
I'd say just personally, my best years were always right after bad times. Right? I mean, I started in business in 1986. Goes a long time. But 1987, Black Sunday, remember? Or Black Monday? Horrible, right? I just started in the business. But then a few years after, we're like on fire. And then
That was all because of policy.
whatever it was, it's either the policy or it's shifts in the market or it's new optimism after bad times. September 11th, right? COVID. 2008, you know, with Lehman, right? Right after were like the best time. So if you can sustain, if you can keep your head above water financially, physically, mentally, psychologically, emotionally, right? Because that's where we're in, and you can get through it, and you have the right support system around you, whether it's family or friends, that's what I think picks you up. And if you get through that wave, then, you know, the future usually is better, right?
Yeah, Shlomi, I'd like to just follow up on what Bess said. And, you know, I only know the commercial sector of the business, but I assume there's a lot of crossover. But there's three things I've always seen in the very top commercial building sales agents. They possess three characteristics that are in all of them in a big way. One, they're an expert at their market segment. They pick a market sector that's narrow enough that you can get it under your fingernails and know everything about it. It's small enough that you can do that, but big enough you can make a good living. Second, they absolutely love it. They have tremendous passion for the business. You have to have passion because no matter how good you are, the market always has been, is, and always will be cyclical. You're going to have tough times. It's that passion that gets you through the tough times to stay around for those inevitably better times that will show up. And then the third thing, and that gets to, you asked, what should agents be doing today? The third characteristic is the ability to use discipline well. And I say use discipline as opposed to have discipline because everybody in this room has the ability to utilize the same amount of discipline, but we all choose to use discipline differently. And I'll bring you back to what Abraham Lincoln said, who is discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. And if you have the ability to do the sometimes very mundane and boring things that brokers have to do, but use discipline to keep doing them over and over and over again, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. If you have that ability and you're doing fundamentally the right things, ultimately you will succeed greatly.
Consistency is everything. So let's get to policy, right? Let's talk about some of these proposals, and let's talk about whether it's rhetoric or reality, and I want to get all your, take on it. So first policy, build 200,000 publicly funded affordable homes, right? This policy is, the plan calls for the city to triple the production of publicly funded affordable homes, which is about 200,000 in the next 10 years, targeted to households earning under $70,000. Bob?
Well, again, supply is the solution to our housing crisis. 485X stinks. The legislature tried to make it an everything bagel, but not only did they put everything on the bagel, they put nuts and bolts and salmon and everything on the bagel. It was just
capped how many bagels you could make.
inedible. So, so we need change there. But again, with the proper incentives, the private sector will do anything you want them to do. I think to the extent we went back to the original 421A program, it was a great program. We'll get as much affordable housing as you want. The private sector has tremendous dexterity and will do anything you incentivize them to do, just the incentives are wrong.
So is this realistic?
Absolutely. Look, what's realistic is how much land does New York City own in the most prime part of New York City? New York City, Manhattan, south of 96th Street. How much land does New York City own? I had city planning into my map room. They didn't even know. The city owns 196 acres of land south of 96th Street in Manhattan. On that land is 30 million feet of public housing. There's 15 million feet of air rights. The land all has crappy zoning. A lot of it is waterfront. If you just took the FAR to 10 FAR on that land the city owns, there's 60 million feet of air rights. That's $26 billion worth of air the city has they're doing nothing with. And the lot coverage on public housing is about 12 to 14%. Private sector housing is about 70% lot coverage. So you have these massive super blocks that are like 3 blocks put together. There's 4 buildings there that are separated by big parking lots and playgrounds and stuff. And you have 1,000 people living on a parcel of land where 10 or 20,000 people could be living. You build one new building right in the middle, tell people, oh, I'm so sorry to inconvenience you, but you have to move from this totally crappy building where rats are gnawing at your face at night and your ceiling's falling down, and you have no hot water. You have to walk 100 feet over to this brand new building. You'll pay the same rent for the same square footage. Sorry to inconvenience you. And then knock down the other 4 buildings and build 10 times the amount of housing that we have on that land. And that's just Manhattan in the most prime areas. Could you imagine if the city did this citywide? And look, there's a pilot program now related, and Essence Development are doing projects over in Chelsea. Great project. They're going to knock the old crappy buildings down because no matter how much money you put into them, you can't really fix them up. And they're building all new buildings. Why aren't there 100 of those projects going on at the same time?
But why not? Is it regulation?
Because
is it investment?
the politicians don't want the person living in that dilapidated unit getting their face chewed by the rat at night complaining that they have to move 100 feet to a new building.
How can Mamdani move the needle on this? And
Interestingly, I've heard, and it sounds completely counterintuitive, but I've heard from somebody who's close to one of his insiders that he's actually anti-union. I'd be shocked if that actually is the case. But if he is, I mean, doing things that will promote new supply, making those changes, convincing people, hey, you're going to have a much better quality of life. When do tenants have a better quality of life? When buildings are falling apart and people have no incentive to invest in them, or when you're in new housing?
But how do you get anything passed or done with the city council that doesn't understand
anything
at all?
You vote yes on those addendums on the back of the ballot
2 through 5.
that will eliminate member deference. What's member deference? Member deference supports the person who says, I don't want new people in my district because they're not going to vote for me. You totally neuter that person, which is what you need. It should almost be the opposite of member deference. It should be every other city council member votes on it based on what's needed.
The city council is spending $2 million in taxpayer money on mailers to tell people to vote against that proposal because they want to keep member deference, because that's like the base of the power. Like,
So we need our political system to change. Instead of a 4-year term for the city council people, make it 6 years, but you can only run once. So you get into office, the minute you get into office, you don't think about how do I get reelected. You think about what do I do that's in the best interest of my constituents.
You have to get a complete mind shift on politics for that. Every person who's running or is in politics today cares about getting reelected versus what the will of the people want. And that needs, I don't know how you change that, unless Jason wants to run for something.
Thank you.
So we talked about rent freezes. Is it rhetoric or is it reality? I mean, I understand there's some legal constraints about that, and you said it's actually illegal what he's proposing. So is this real, or is this really just
Well,
lip
it's
service?
against the law. The one thing that nobody was talking about until very recently is that there are 9 seats on the Rent Guidelines Board. 7 of those seats are vacant. Basically, the terms have expired, so there's a push to put people in, but that will delay the rent freeze for a year or two. But the mayor controls the Rent Guidelines Board, so could the freeze happen? Yes. Is it illegal? Yes. To say, well, we're indexing and I'm going to do something based on, legally I have to do what the numbers say I have to do, but I'm going to disregard that and just give you a rent freeze anyway.
But de Blasio was horrible in that regard as well, so let's not forget.
No, that's absolutely.
But if you object to, say, President Trump putting his finger on the scale with the Fed, you should be equally outraged about the mayor putting his finger on the scale when it comes to the RGB. It's the same concept. They have a fiduciary responsibility when they take their oath to serve to look at the data. And by the way, if you notice at the debate, what did Mamdani say about the data? He said, well, landlord net profits are up 12%. First of all, that's not true. What he was looking at is for rent stabilized buildings. He said it's up 12%. That also includes free market buildings that may have one rent stabilized unit, and the 12% is actually the net operating income figure, which, as Bob will tell you, is not profit. So either he doesn't understand basic economics, or he's just deceiving you on purpose because he wants to push through his rent program.
Or both.
What about higher corporate and top earner taxes? There's a proposal to raise corporate tax to around 11.5 of 12%, and taxes on earners of over $1 million to fund the programs.
First of all, it's a move from 7.5 to 11.5% in corporate taxes, which is a 58% tax increase. And the reason he wants to increase taxes on 58% is he says, well, it's 11.5% in New Jersey. Now, unless we're talking about Bruce Springsteen, I have no idea why we're comparing ourselves to New Jersey. Point one. Point two, if your goal is to make New York more affordable, how exactly do you make New York more affordable if the small business owner on your corner has to have a tax increase of 58%? What does that mean? What are they going to do? They're going to eat that? I don't think so.
Well, Jason, you forgot about the 50% New York resident tax. He wants to go from 4 to 6.
4 to 6. But let's say you're a small business owner. You have to pass that cost on to your customer. And what does that do? It makes New York less affordable. So the tax increases that he is proposing, 58% on small businesses. And then on the income tax side, it's not a 2% increase for top earners. It's a 2% rise, which is a 13% tax increase. And if you saw at the rally, if anyone stomached it, watched the rally where 13,000 people came out in Forest Hills, what were they yelling at Governor Hochul? Tax the rich, tax the rich, tax. And what did she say? What did she say back? She said, I hear you. Which is not what she said to Bob privately, but she said, I hear you. So what happens is, don't forget, Governor Hochul's up for re-election. She's a primary next June and general next year. Legislative session in Albany, January through June. Budget is due April 1st, which means maybe he doesn't get his whole tax program through, but maybe there's a negotiation.
So there is a state cooperation here. This is not...
Well, of course, no, he needs state cooperation for a lot of this, but we should not assume, oh, the governor's just going to say no. Sorry, that's naive. It's not how politics works. This could be a negotiating platform for a smaller tax increase. Okay, so maybe corporate taxes only go up 7.5 to 9%. Oh, okay, well, that's a 33% increase. Is that good? Is that a win? I don't think so.
No, you also have to look at the fact that in the last statistic that I had on this was from 2019, that 1,600 families in New York paid 27% of the income taxes. 1,600. Now, COVID happened. Now, if you're in that 1,600 families, you probably have 3, 4, or 5 homes. You could live anywhere you want to live. Your private jet could get you wherever you want to get to in minutes. How many of those people still live in New York? So I sit on the executive committee at Reuveni. I think Leah are on that, Bess. And we had the guy who controls the city budget in for a meeting. And I asked him, I said, we had the 1,600 families paying 27% of the taxes. Do you know how many of those 1,600 families still domicile and pay taxes in New York? And he said he didn't know. So either he didn't want to tell us, or he really doesn't know. And if he doesn't know, he's the person who's in the best position to know. That's crazy that they're not tracking this. But you can't ultimately, people vote with their feet. And the richest people are the easiest ones that can move. So it's a huge problem.
What about city-run grocery stores? The policy is city-operated supermarkets. It's one per borough, I believe, providing affordable groceries in undeserved areas.
Stupidest idea ever. Okay, and no, but here is the reality. What's the profit margin? The grocery stores have probably the smallest profit margin of any business. Their profit margin is like 1.2%. What are you going to do? You're going to cut the price by 1.2%, or are you going to run at a deficit? Look, I was a child, teenager in the 70s, and I remember my mom and dad making me take the car to the gas station to wait on the gas line when Nixon tried to cut inflation by price fixing stuff. I waited on the gas line for an hour to fill up the car. And yeah, the gas was less expensive. I'd rather pay twice as much and not have to wait an hour online. I'm telling you, these publicly owned grocery stores, when you price fix, it leads to black market stuff, it leads to supply constraint, it leads to shortages, that nobody in history has ever done this successfully. So this kid is going to be the first human being to ever do this and make it work. There's no way it's going to be a total disaster. Watch.
So I'll add to that. What about free bus service?
Same. Nothing's free. It costs somebody something.
So it's just rhetoric. There's no.
Well, I don't think it's right. I think this is really his agenda. I think he believes he'll be able to implement it. And believe it or not, there is some discussion in Albany about how this he could get approval for this. It's $700-900 million.
So that's state and MTA.
State is the MTA because goes back to 1968. Why the state runs the MTA due to Robert Moses. But yes, it could be done maybe you give him that. And then what happens to our buses? I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, I think people would pay for a fast bus. I think if you take the bus, you're like, oh, this is too slow. But I think you should focus on a fast bus rather than a free bus. You probably get a lot of support.
Well,
for that.
they get the homeless people off the street.
Well,
They'll live on the buses.
That's
on
what
the
I was
bus.
saying.
They'll be
Mobile
roving.
homes.
Yeah, they'll be roving
lot of
vagrant
loiter.
buses.
Okay, next one. Upzoning wealthier neighborhoods. Right? The plan is increase allowable density in affluent zones and in and around mass transit. This would require rezoning.
Well, city planning's been doing that for 50 years, and it makes all the sense in the world. We should be upzoning areas around mass transit and downzoning areas far away from mass transit.
So this is nothing new. This is something that's
That was de Blasio, by the way. That was something that was a big part of his administration. He talked a lot about upzoning for more housing.
Right. And what about institutional taxation? I think it's mostly hospitals and universities. Here it's reducing exemptions for large nonprofits to shift fiscal burden. Any thoughts on that? Any legal difficulties over there?
I have no idea. That I don't know.
Jason
None of
knows.
us really know. I think a lot of what you've talked about, there are some things maybe that he could do. He needs support to get it done. I think he's going to try. I think really what he's selling is a narrative more so than what he will actually be able to accomplish if he does indeed win.
But the narrative holds, and the narrative sticks, and the narrative works, and the narrative. Look at where Mamdani is today. Did anybody know his name just a couple months ago?
Lionized, as you said.
Lionized won the prize. But what's interesting is he diagnosed brilliantly the problem, right? Even his own polling when he first started to run, his polling said to run on public safety, and he disregarded it and said, I'm going to run on affordability. So he had an innate sense to diagnose what was the problem with, the biggest problem with New York. The problem is his prescriptions for the problem are all wrong, but it's because he got it right that he's the Democratic nominee.
Well, I can see the appeal, right? I mean, people look at him, and he's very exciting on camera, and he dresses well, and he smiles well, and he says everything that needs to be
Smirks
said.
well, I'd say. He
Right,
smirks
but then,
well.
devil's advocate. Why isn't Cuomo talking about these points? Why isn't Adams talking about these points? Why aren't these people who have been in executive power for so long pushing these initiatives and these proposals that actually, work for 90% of the population.
Well, Adams tried to, and his polling was horrible. It was impossible for him to win. And Cuomo, I think he took it for granted that he would win the primary. He didn't run a strong race. He had some ad with him on TV, like fixing somebody's car that people were laughing at. And I think he's not the favorite candidate of people for various reasons. You can, make that your decision about that. And so this guy comes in with all this social media and new message, affordability, and every young person in the world decides they're going to vote, and he upsets the whole primary. And so now Cuomo's trying to play catch up, and he's doing a good job. And now everybody's going out to vote, but it's an uphill battle. And so we just don't have great people. That's really the issue. We really don't have great people and great choices. And by the way, Adams will still be on the ballot when people will vote, and people might not know that he's not in this race anymore, and they might vote for him. That's a challenge. And Sliwa will take 300,000 or 400,000 votes away from Cuomo. So it's going to be very hard, I think. I mean, there's possibility. But if he does win, if Mamdani does win, we have to give him a chance. We have to lean into it and work with him. It's just how it goes, right?
And it's not just Mamdani. We as an industry, if we object to if we don't like what happened in the election, we have to better organize ourselves. It's not just that Mamdani came out of nowhere. He came out of somewhere. It's called the DSA. And they've been spending the last 8 years, every single day, working and organizing and building volunteer lists and going door to door. This was not an accident. This is by design. But it's just political organizing. Yeah. And so if you don't like what happens on November 4th, the sun's going to rise on November 5th. And welcome to the resistance. It's time to get organized because there are millions of voters out there, and it doesn't end on November 4th. It just begins.
Cool. So what Bess said about we don't have good people, I think the good people exist. I think the smart people, the energetic people, the people with good policies and good head on their shoulders who have an understanding of this city and business and what needs to be done, they're here. One of them is sitting right next to me. This man could be mayor of New York, and a very successful one and a good one, but politics is a different animal, right? Who wants to be in that?
Yeah, thanks for that, Shlomi. But I love my family too much. When Paul was running for mayor, I said to him, Paul, what the heck are you doing? I said, even if you do a great job, half the people are going to hate your guts. And unfortunately, that's the reality.
Jason, any take on that, since you're so involved in the civic world and engagement, et cetera?
Well, I mean, no mayor has gone on to serve any other public office in New York City. So, there's a reason for that. People think Teddy Roosevelt was mayor. He's police commissioner. He wasn't mayor.
Well, Bloomberg wanted another term, right?
No, but he lost for president. They don't. There's something about the office. It's a very you have 8 million New Yorkers and 24 million opinions, and like Bob said, they boo you everywhere you go. So it's a tough
right.
gig.
I have a great panel here. Everybody, they're perfect. They've been on time when we write on time. But I want to open this up and see if there are any questions from the audience. Lisa.
I'm surprised no one talked about Local 97 and how that's going to affect the co-op and condo and our industry in general. And there were 3, I think 2 were for it and 1 was against it, the Local Law 97. So I'm just wondering if anybody has...
Yeah, Lisa, I'll tell you, Local Law 97, which is the carbon emissions, it's nothing more than another tax. It's a revenue process for the city. Most office building owners are not even thinking about it because they don't know if they're going to be the owner of their building next week, let alone invest millions of dollars to get carbon emissions down. So I think that everybody is hiding their head in the sand relative to that issue because it just seems like it's so far out. But what tells you everything you need to know about Local Law 97 is that it applies to every building not owned by the city. So if the city doesn't want to comply, what does that tell you?
But that's underway, right? I mean, that's happening right now.
So just to that, to Jason's point about mobilizing, what do we as an industry do to get ahead of these, right? Because I'm already seeing clients look at properties that have D ratings and say, how's this going to impact? So they're already asking the question. So the question is, how do we as an industry start communicating or messaging to push back against these things which are we end up where we did with the rents, with the Fair Act and all that kind of stuff. We wait until it happens, and then nothing happens. So how do we get ahead of stuff like that so we actually have an influence on the state or on the city council to make decisions that actually make the market better?
I think if you look at you go back to the beginning and become more politically aware and politically active and vote and convince your friends and your family and anybody you know that is eligible to vote, that's the way you get different people in.
And you go-
People, sorry, Beth, people were so outraged at some of the positions Alvin Bragg has taken as DA. Do you know he won his race by 60%? And he's been saying the same thing for decades. So people voted for this guy. So become more politically active.
But also that's where the next city council speaker is really important, because the city council speaker is a very powerful position.
Yeah.
He or she sets the agenda for the council, and that person could potentially block a lot of local legislation. And also, there may be time to still do an extension on Local Law 97 if we have the right city council speaker. So that's where that becomes important, whether it's Julie Menon or one of the other candidates. That's where that becomes important. And also, if you want to get politically active, join NIRAC and ARA. Please join us. We're very active on these fights.
Questions? Come on, this is a smart crowd.
You have one over there, Shlomi.
Hi, really great panel. So going back to the taxes and also where people might be migrating to, where do we feel like people are going to be moving to if that ends up happening? Because I keep getting that question. Are they going to Florida, Texas? Where should we expect people moving from New York?
No, I mean, I think we saw a huge exodus during the pandemic of people going to Florida. That's still a place where we see people moving. But remember, they weren't just moving because of the pandemic. People move to Florida because they want to retire, new job, new whatever it is, new business. Some companies have opened in Florida. I think Florida is one of those places. You mentioned Austin. That's another place apparently that's very popular today. But I would say Florida to me is probably the #1 place that we're seeing New Yorkers move to.
Is that still happening?
Yeah, you're still seeing people. I mean, Palm Beach is, people are.
I gotta tell you, I was in a Publix this past weekend, which is like the supermarket down there,
yeah.
and the 3 newspapers that were for sale in Publix in South Florida was the New York Times, the New York Post, the New York Daily News. That's it.
What if you feel?
Shlomi, I'm still convinced LeBron James signed with the Heat versus the Knicks because of the tax structure down there.
Tax structure I can understand. Lifestyle I cannot. I'm a New Yorker. I like Florida. It's fun. Yeah, the beaches are great. The clubs are great. The food is great. Now I'm raising kids. I have 3 kids. 2 of them are young. They go to school here. Could I see myself living in Florida regardless of tax structure? I cannot. But to your point, if you're seeing it, who's doing it? Is it families with kids that still go to school? Or is it people at a certain age where maybe they don't have kids, they don't need to worry about schools, they can go back and forth. The tax aspect is very important to them, but they don't necessarily need to be in the city to live here, to feel it, to experience what we love about it so much. What age groups?
I mean, it's a mixture, but it's typically older empty nesters who are going there because they just also, again, quality of life for people matters. Some people don't want to deal with the chaos. Not everybody wants to be in the mix, and I think the city is wonderful, but it's not for everybody, and a lot of people want to dial it down a little bit, play tennis or whatever they do and relax. Yeah, so I think that it's a mixture of that. But we saw Goldman's there. There's a lot of businesses. Citadel is now there. It's West Palm Beach has been totally redeveloped, and so it's got a big draw to it.
It's beautiful and amazing, but you can still have a more interesting conversation, a 30-second ride in an elevator than going any.
We're a little bit biased.
Any beach in Miami, as far as if I can say. And if I can just, from our perspective in terms of sales and what we're seeing in terms of buyers, we're seeing a lot of people moving to New York.
Yeah.
From the West Coast, from California, San Francisco, LA, Carolinas, Texas, and Florida. Moving here, Google opened up their headquarters.
Yeah.
They bought a building for $2 billion, just a few blocks away from here, right? Disney opens up their headquarters. And there's a lot of people that are moving here, a lot of families and singles, like all type of demographics. But we sold a lot this past 6 months to people who had moved into New York from other areas. So, you know, this thing about people leaving New York, people don't want to be here, they don't like, they want to play tennis elsewhere because it's too noisy here. I get that for like a certain kind of a buyer, but New York is New York. I mean, come on.
I agree.
Look at this view. I mean, just look outside this window. I see a hand over there. I don't know who that is. Go ahead. Oh, it's Lisa. Hi, Lisa.
I agree, by the way. I think that the migration is cyclical. I think sometimes people move out of New York because I have friends who grew up in New York and lived here their whole lives, and now they're kind of like, you know what, I don't have to live here all the time anymore. But to Shlomi's point, I see a lot of people who move here who are my age because their kids live here and their grandchildren live here. So I think sometimes you just have a switching of people. But one thing I want to ask is, what I've been amazed is they're talking about affordability so much. One of the things that no one brings up is the affordability and quality of schools. Because you can talk about housing all you want. It's really one of the most expensive things for, and what drives the most families out of New York. It's not just the space, it's educating their children. And the ability to get them into good public schools or not, and then not being able to afford private schools. And none of the candidates talked about it enough, and I don't understand why.
Well, the big point there, and I think that's an awesome point, is to understand that the children need someone to advocate for them. Because the teachers' union and the head of the teachers' union advocates for the teachers. If the teachers' union head is doing an unbelievably fantastic job, the teachers don't have to go to work and get paid double. It's all about the teacher comp. It's not about the kids. It's not about the efficacy of education. It's not about the scores that the kids get. It's about getting benefits for the teachers. Great. Have a union, fantastic. But recognize that someone needs to advocate for the children. And once that is the biggest problem we have, and the public school system here is not what it should be, given how it's the 10th biggest.
Right, but Mamdani is also talking about major changes to the gifted and talented, the G&T program, the Shazat test. So there are a lot of changes that he wants to make to the system that may hurt families who use those programs to get a really good education for their children in public schools.
Thank you for this. It was so much more sane than yesterday. I think this is my question. How do we get each of our firms, including commercial, thanks for being here, have our brokers be more involved in the community? I think that's the real, that's the part that we as a community, as an industry, is missing. I canvassed for Landers before the primary, and almost the entire Upper East Side voted for Cuomo, but Landers, Cuomo lost, and it went, all the voters, all of our votes went to Mamdani. And when I was volunteering, I volunteered a lot of NYCHA places. In Queens and in Brooklyn, it is hundreds of thousands of people voting for Mamdani. And I think we are detached from that part of New York, because none of those people are going to be interacting with us. How do we, because I know every corner of New York City, there's a broker. How do we unite and go, hey, we don't just care, we're not just transactional, we're relational. We care for our safety, for our schools, for affordable housing, instead of the reality TV that, Cheo say won. I think it's because the narrative that we don't care, we just open doors and we earn money and we're paid too much. It's not the truth. I think the answer is that we educate our communities, we go to the community boards, but how do we do that? We're losing the narrative. We're losing the part where we actually, I said, as you know, Bess, both my kids go to private schools, and Lisa, he's talking the truth. It's $60,000 a year. I'm not going to send my kids to public schools, right? But the majority of the people voting are sending their kids to public schools. How do we get involved? What are the organizations that our firms are going to do?
So Antonio mentioned CHEOSE, which he's referring to the FAIR Act, which of course everyone in the room is now familiar with. But this is where the organizing comes in. And by the way, these are the kinds of issues that Mauricio and I talk about all the time, not just in New York City, around the country, is that as agents, we're the boogeyman. We're the low-hanging fruit in politics right now. There's a target on us politically because politicians can score cheap political points by coming after us. And part of the reason that is because of what Bess said earlier. She said we're ranked under the used car salesman in consumer polls. So because the public has a low regard for us, policymakers see us as an easy target, and so they come after us. And they're doing this here and in lots of other parts of the country. So one thing that we need to do as an industry, first and foremost, is change that narrative about what it is that we do, how we do it, why we do it, and why it's so important. And one quick example on that is, like, if I wanted to sell you one share of Apple stock right now, what is it, $260 or so? I can't do that. I have to get a sponsor. I have to get a background check. I have to go through rigorous testing. But if I want to sell you a home in the Midwest for $265,000, biggest investment you'll ever make, give me a month and some easy testing, and I'm there. We make it so easy around the country. So many brokers aren't professionals. We're the only industry around the country where people say, oh, yeah, you know, I should get a license. It'll be good to have it, right? Like, you hear that all the time, right? Do you ever hear a stockbroker say that? Do you ever hear a lawyer say that? You ever hear a doctor? Would you go to a doctor who's like, yeah, I got my license to practice medicine? No, of course not. We're the only industry in America that tolerates this. We think it's wrong. We've been working around the country to change that. We think standards should be raised. We think we should be more organized as an industry. We are a force. There are 3 million agents around the country. We should be better organized. And if we can, we think we can help change the narrative, help elect people who will understand where we're coming from. We'll get better leadership. We'll get better results. And I think that will change the industry.
I got time for one other question. Esther.
Okay, so I'm here because the voting is coming up, and there are about 100 people in here, and you were all talking about, I don't want to be a politician, and Bob, and to all of you that I know, I don't want to run for mayor, but I think there's something we can do, to your point. And I'm going to take local 97. Each one of us has been in the industry long enough to have a sphere of influence, our own database, our own e-blast. We are in the most amazing, influential position, having the database, whether it's Brokers Loop or Active Pipe or your own sphere, to reach out before they vote this coming November 4th, because yes, I'm concerned. And I'm here because I would like us to realize how devastating it could be to see someone like Mamdani come in. Is that his right name?
We know who you mean.
No, I'm serious.
Mamdani.
Exactly.
Mamdani.
So here it is. Here it is. Local 97 affects most of our clients because we have the high end, the condominiums, the co-ops going to electric. And it's a serious issue because it would cost each one of us millions and millions of dollars for the building. I know I'm on my co-op board. Each one of us can leave today feeling that we are proactive and we have influence. Take your database, take your clients, take your companies, talk to each other, and let them know to vote, even though I can't stand him, Cuomo. Carter used to be my friend. I called him. I said, I'm done. You should have been out of here. You're a spoiler. So yes, we do have influence. And yes, I'm here because I want all of you to urge your sphere of influence to vote against Mamdani.
All right. Amen, sister. Go, Esther.
All right.
Yes. Leave it done. Okay.
Thank you, Esther. Let me. I want to give you my take.
I have my
That was good.
Just a personal note for me, and then I want to show you something, and I want to get feedback. So I've lived in New York since 1982. Over those 4 decades, I've watched this city rise, fall, and reinvent itself more times than I can count. While I've always known about anti-Semitism, I can honestly say I never personally experienced it in this city. Not in school, not in business, not in life. For me, New York was never about religion. It was always been a city of connection, a shared purpose, people from every background and belief working side by side. But in the past 2 years, something has changed. We've seen, and many have felt, a rise in hate, incitement, open displays of anti-Semitism that none of us imagined we'd experience again in our lifetimes. I have 3 daughters. I wanted to grow up into independent, confident women. I want my friends and family to feel safe, to live and walk freely in the same New York that gave me every opportunity. And it makes me ask, will it get worse under Mamdani's administration? Now, New York isn't just any other city, right? We all know it. It's the financial capital of the world. There have been 500 years of changes. A place where business, culture, and capital converge like nowhere else. Leading this city requires more than ideology. It requires balance, experience, and the ability to unify a complex ecosystem of people, capital, and vision. My world, our industry, runs on confidence and investment. Capital once loved Mayor Bloomberg, who I consider one of New York's great mayors. In the shadow of 9/11, most of you will remember, he rebuilt the city, revitalized its foundation, and restored global confidence in New York as the world's capital. Yes, there were areas like affordable housing where more could have been done, but he led with steadiness, pragmatism, and credibility. So the question now is Zohar Mamdani too divisive, too inexperienced to fill those shoes? Time will tell. What I do know is this: no single man, no single mayor, no administration, and no political moment is bigger than New York City itself. Our strength has always come from our people. Resilience, creativity, and our refusal to let fear or politics define us. So yes, I worry. But I also believe deeply in New York's endurance, its spirit, and its power to remain what it has always been, and in my opinion, 500 years or not, will be the most important city in the world. Now, if you'd indulge me, this period marks 4 decades of me being in this business, 40 years of being in this business. There are 2 people sitting in the audience here, Edith and Raleigh. Could you raise your hands, please? They started me off in this business. Some of you may remember a company called Sofer. Sofer, 40 years ago, was the best and only place to do real estate, the only brokerage in the city. Now, there were no condos, there was no new development, there was co-ops, and there were rentals. And that's where Raleigh and Edith started me off. In 1986, I was barely out of high school, right? I had an apartment, I had to pay rent, I had no money, but I got a job in real estate. And real estate has been my life. I never did anything else, no industry, I never traded stocks. I don't even know what stocks look like, right? Never been there. A lot of Israelis go into the moving business. I never did moving. I started off as a real estate rental agent in 1986. The first deal I did as Edith's assistant was a studio in a building on 86th and 3rd Avenue. I made like $450. It was all the money in the world to me. And Hank Sofer, who some of you may know, Hank Sofer, when he saw me celebrating in the office, he came to me and he said, "What, kid, what's going on?" I said, "Well, I just did a rental deal. I made $432. It was like 25% of an OP. I don't even remember what it was." He said, "Listen, you know, you're a smart kid. You look good. Go out there, have fun, do what makes you happy. Come back here tomorrow. Remember one thing: you're only as good as your next deal, not as your last deal. Forget about your last deal. Your last deal is already in the rear view mirror, right? What do you got for me tomorrow? right? That was 40 years ago. Now, been through ups and downs, all these cycles. Trust me when I tell you, some people in this audience, like Itzy and Juliet and maybe a few others, know the fire that we've been through, certain part of our lives. But all the cycles, the economic, and everything that comes with, right? Family, finding the business, the balance, etc. Let me tell you something, it's exhausting. Doing this for 40 years is exhausting. And 25 years ago, on or about, I found my niche. I do new development really well. I connect with developers really well. The creative process of putting a building together is like raising a kid. From nothing to sell out, which is like, graduation, and then cashing the check. Kid is out of the house. Right? Which will happen with my kid, Maya, right here. Maya just celebrated 24. She's getting her first new apartment. But 40 years in the business, and I said, wow, man, I'm 58. And the question is, what do I do next, right? Where do I want to be in 5 years? Like, when people come to ask for a job, it's like, what do you want to be in 5 years? What do you see yourself in 5 years? What do I want to do in 5 years? We're at a crossroads right now as far as a company. We're doing really well. I have an amazing team, which I have to tip my hat to. I couldn't do anything without them. And we have a pipeline of incredible projects that are coming in, 26, 27, 28. Some of the biggest conversions in the city, we have the only boutique firm in the city that's privately owned that does new development companies. And we're in the company of Brown Harris Stevens and the agency and Compass and Corcoran and Douglas Elliman and all the massive, mammoths out there, public firms, and the Shlomi Reuveni and the Reuveni Development Marketing. And it's a lot of fun. So I decided after 40 years to put something together that would celebrate the 40 years in the business in the form of song and dance. And I'd like to share it with you. Please.
This is the story of a kid from Tel Aviv who made his way to Queens at the age of 15. Who would have thought this immigrant in New York would go on to change the course of the NY skyline? Flea market mornings, nightclubs in the PM. Sofa came a-calling, he carped the DM. Tank tops switch for suits from discount shelves. Typewriters quick cause he rewrites himself.
Always revenge.
Turnstile hopping, there's no stopping this kid. Black Monday hipper, he ain't popping his lid. Corcoran called, it's a whole new game. Moved into sales, now he's making his name. Did chapping solo, gritting each breath. Tip the tightrope, ain't no safety net. Devils in the sky, 9/11. The Maya came and gave him hope, what a blessing. Second off called, he said he belonged. On his back, disciplined and strong. Met an angel between earth and heaven. Her heart of gold changed his whole direction. Moved into new waters, uncharted. Town deals cracked, he's bruised, broken hearted. But little did he know he was just getting started.
Always Reuveni. Always at NYC. We're always ahead, yeah, that's what I say. Reaching for the sky, always Reuveni.
COVID hits and the world shuts down. Deals on Zoom as the city goes ghost town. So from Wall we keep his head high.
NYC, always. Always at NYC. Always ahead. Reaching for the sky.
He sets up the shot, his eyes are steady. Next wave of towers locked and ready. The future's bright, cause we're
Always Reuveni.